Hey guys, it's Selwen here. Today let's talk about the Frost Decay. Coming over from Legion, it hasn't changed overly much, it still is that simple spec to pick up and play, with a lot of procs based on your very spammy abilities. Amazing cleave and AoE damage is also something that you will find to be great in Frost, although fairly slow movement. Your resources will also play a large part in the Frost gameplay. In fact, a lot of your abilities' priorities will be based on those same resources, runes and runic power. Together they will feed off each other, as spending runes will grant you 10 runic power, while spending runic power has a chance to instantly refresh a rune, which normally just comes off a timer, much like an ability cooldown. Maximizing these resources will be key into mastering your Frost Decay. Now, let's talk talents before going into the nitty-gritty of your rotation. Your talent choices here are still based on your last tier somewhat, Obliteration and Breath of Cindergrosa. Currently, Breath of Cindergrosa is the best for single target, with Obliteration rather close to it, offering a simpler playstyle with much less risk, as a Breath is a channel-like ability which will drain all of your runic power slowly every second. So the idea with it will be to keep it up with your rotation and maintaining it as long as possible, offering great results, especially when there's cleave, but in single target also. That said, it also restrains you from moving away from a boss or mob, almost locking you in place to make the most out of it. So take that in mind, it might take a little practice. Obliteration won't change much, it's just going to improve your Pillars of Frost CD. It does also change your rotation, but by just clicking two buttons back to back. More on that later. Ice Cap is currently rather weak, is the easier choice out of them all, not changing your gameplay really except for faster CDs. Point is, some previous choices will depend on what you choose, Obliteration or Breath, so let's talk about them. Cold Heart and Icy Talons. Both of these offer a very similar DPS increase and work for either build. Cold Heart is gonna offer a new damaging ability of sorts. Your Chains of Ice gains a stacking damage buff every second, once at max. Using it will deal a pretty hefty amount of burst damage. A new button to click, but fairly easy to use as long as you combo with CDs like Pillars of Frost. Icy Talons is a complete passive. Frost Strike or Breath of Cindergrosa damage add a stacking buff, increasing your auto attack speed. What this will offer is more procs, such as killing machines. Your proc to make Obliterate crits comes from auto attacks, so faster attacks, overall more procs. The buff is fairly easy to keep up, just mechanics or your ability priorities can sometimes prevent you to use a Frost Strike to keep up the buff, so take that in mind as well. Again, pick whichever you prefer or sim to seek which is the best for your character. Inexorable Assault is currently too weak in comparison. Tier 2 Horn of Winter is my preferred choice, yet another ability to click on a 45-second cooldown, but granting you resources on demand, 2 runes and 15 runic power. This is a clear best if you with Breath of Cindergrosa, helping it extend it. With Obliteration is also amazing, but getting resource hungry there isn't as common, so you can use it anyway, but you have the choice of getting a complete passive option like Runic Attenuation. Auto attacks generate 3 runic power. This is best to get in combination with Icy Talons for obvious reasons. This is a decent choice overall, even for Breath. It's easier to use but doesn't offer that control that Horn of Winter gives, but hey, if you prefer it, it works, especially for Obliteration like I said. Murderous Efficiency is pretty decent also. Consuming a Killing Machine proc has a 50% chance to give 1 rune back, so it works. Not much for Breath, more so for Obliteration, but comparing to the others is far more RNG reliant on getting Killing Machines and for the talent itself to proc, so take it at your own discretion. The other two are a safer pick. Next tier is completely optional, so take whatever you think is best. Next is Cleave choices, the glorious and only Frost Sight, the must for any AoE situation, like Mythic Plus, replacing your Obliterate. More on that later, but yeah, anytime there's any sort of AoE or cleave, even on 2 targets, go for this. Frozen Pulse will then be a more single target option anytime you below 3 full runes, so your resources, you radiate a pulse, dealing damage all around based on auto attacks again. Its AoE damage simply isn't enough to compete for multi-target situations, but for single target, go for it. since you're not gonna use Frost Sight at all. Avalanche is alright, adds more damage to your Howling Blasts with Rime, but the damage isn't that high. It technically works for any situation, contrary to the other choices which have specific uses, but is a master of none. Next is completely optional as well. Do you want more mobility or survivability is what's gonna make up your decision here. And on the following tier, Frostworm Fury is all around amazing choice for anything, awesome looking cooldown for big dick damage, especially when you can hit multiple targets, but even for single is pretty great as well. Now, Gathering Storm is the best choice in pure single target when used properly, improving your Remorseless Winter per rune spent. Outside of single target though, either Frostworm or the new Glacial Advance will be better. Glacial Advance is basically the Frost Sight to your Frost Strike. It will be used in its place, causing runic power, so it does proc things like Icy Talons, so it's a great choice for sustaining AoE like Mythic Plus. The choice for Mythic Plus between this and Frostworm is personal, both have their use, so make up your decision, Burst versus Sustain. And then on the last tier, we already went over, just one last note, for Mythic Plus, Obliteration tends to be better for the reasons we're gonna talk about later, but Breath is still pretty decent, granted you know when to use it on trash packs, and still have it ready for bosses. Now let's go over your rotation, and before talking openers and cooldowns and all of that, let's go over the general idea of how to play your Frost DK, and it's pretty much about these two buttons, Obliterate and Frost Strike. One consumes runes, 2 infect, and the other runic power, 25. Since each rune grants 10 runic power, Obliterate almost directly feeds into a Frost Strike. But in the middle of this, you also got your dot, Frost Fever, also having a chance when dealing damage to grant 5 runic power. It's applied from your Howling Blast, and on itself the ability is really weak and you shouldn't really use it without a proc called Rime, vastly increasing its damage. How can you get it? Well, through Obliterates. So when you start up using those same Obliterates, you'll be getting a chance at those procs, and you want to use them right away when you get them so you don't override it with another Obliterate, in turn applying the said dot. Killing Machine is another proc that you're gonna get randomly as they come from auto attacks. They generally won't change it too much, Rime is still gonna take priority over it. At the same time, you will be getting that runic power for Frost Strikes. When do you want to use them? Well, easy, when you low on runes and high on runic power. The general rule tends to be below 3 runes and above 80 to 90 runic power, or when Obliterate is not available to use at all. Now, your Frost Strike or any runic power spending ability also has a proc called Runic Empowerment, granting 1 rune back, hence the reason why you don't want to use Frost Strikes when high on runes, so you don't overcap them. Frost Strike will also be the main way to maintain those Icy Talon stacks if you're using, and generally following these rules, they will stay up naturally, but tracking its timer can be good. You don't want that to drop, so you might have to prioritize a Frost Strike over other abilities at times to keep it up. As for getting Killing Machines when high on runic power, well, it does take priority, so 90 plus runic power, forget the proc, get rid of some runic power, and then do the Obliterate with the Killing Machine. You never want to overcap resources. So basically this is most of what you're gonna do, smashing those 2 buttons, taking in mind your resources and its rules of not overcapping, and of course the procs as well, with the occasional 3rd button for Rime. Generally, if you are a person with only 2 fingers, it's a perfect spec for you, and yeah, I can say that because this used to be my main. If you with Gathering Storm, there will be another button to click in single target. This will take priority above everything because spending runes will increase Remorseless Winter damage and duration, so you want to make sure to use it on cooldown and before you actually start your other abilities. After, nothing changes, it just does its thing in the background as you do your Obliterates and Rimes. Even though they are free, they also count towards Gathering Storm. Now cooldowns, this is playing with Obliteration, I will leave Breath for last. Pillars of Frost is the type of cooldown you want to use it as available, generally as long as you see you will be able to take advantage of its full duration. On itself, nothing changes too much on your rotation, you do more damage and that's it. If you with Obliteration and doing Frost Strikes, Howling Blast, Rimes, and even Glacial Advance in AoE, we'll get there, will immediately grant you a Killing Machine proc with a 30% 50% chance to grant a rune back. So basically it will go, and this could be an opener type of situation, Remorseless Winter first if with Gathering Storm, and then do a single Obliterate. And you don't pop your pillars just yet. No, there's another cooldown to talk about. Empower Rune Weapon, restoring your runes and runic power over time, plus granting 50% haste, lasting for 20 seconds, while pillars lasts for 15. Now with Obliteration, you generally gonna use this when in need of resources, but it's now great to combo with pillars. It's not just a resource cooldown anymore, but a general DPS increase, so you use it as you get it pretty much with and only Pillars of Frost, since both have GCDs using power before pillars. I know it has an awful global cooldown, it sucks giant balls, but yeah, let the animation play out. Now the reason why you also want to do that Obliterate first, you can even go for 2, is because you want to bump your runic power a bit, so you can go for a Frost Strike immediately when Pillars of Frost is up, granting you that Killing Machine proc. Without Obliteration, you won't have to worry about this. You could have just gone for Remorseless Winter, if with Gathering Storm, then Empower Rune Weapon, and then the Pillars of Frost, and enter your regular rotation. But with Obliteration, always make sure to have at least 30 to 40 runic power. So as you enter, you need to do that Frost Strike or Hauling Blast. If you get the Rhyme with that first Obliterate, you would get Killing Machine. Then just go for Obliterate again. Then if you get Rhyme, you go for that. Then another Killing Machine Obliterate. If you don't get Rhyme, just switch it for Frost Strike, always with those abilities back to back, feeding them Killing Machines. Obliterate, Hauling Blast, Obliterate, Frost Strike, if you don't have Rhyme, etc. and etc. till Pillars ends. Just 2 rules about this, and is around resources again. If you're about to cap runic power and have Rhyme, forget about it, go for the Frost Strike instead, just so you don't overcap runic power. And if you don't have Rhyme nor enough runic power for a Frost Strike, just do that sad Obliterate without procs, but this is something that you can easily avoid by going into Pillars of Frost with an already established runic power. Cold Heart also enters the mix here if you're using, like I said previously, it's an extra ability for you to click when high on stacks, preferably near the cap, and you generally want to use it with every Pillars of Frost. The timers should align perfectly, but take in mind the other passive bonus of Pillars of Frost, its strength increase. It's improved by every rune spent, so Obliterates, meaning at the end of the pillars you have the highest damage increase, meaning you want to use Chains of Ice, Cold Heart right at the end of pillars for the highest damage. Getting a weak aura to track all of this will be extremely helpful. If you want mine, check down below in the description. If you happen to be using Frost Worm Fury talent instead of Gathering Storm, the same idea applies as Cold Heart towards the end of Pillars of Frost duration for the highest damage, and preferably when you can hit more than one target. If you're using both talents, Frost Worm is to be used after Cold Heart, so it gets the most improvement. As for Horn of Winter, has a similar use to Empower Rune Weapon. You want to use it on cooldown so you can maximize its uses, granted you're not gonna overcap resources. So as long as you add, say, 3 runes or 2, and you're not near the cap of runic power, use it, alright? Now, that pretty much covers the gist of your rotation and your cooldowns like Obliteration, Pillars of Frost, and Empower Rune Weapon. Quite simple, just resource management for the most part. But what happens when you pop Breath? Well, Breath of Cindergrosa is gonna change both your opener and your priorities when it's up. So first of all, when opening now, what you will do is go for Obliterate, but you won't pop your CDs just yet. No, you will first get to the highest amount of runic power as you can, so you're gonna use 2 or 3 Obliterates, using Rhyme procs if you get, but no Frost Strikes, nor even Remorseless Winter, because its uptime is just gonna be wasted. You want to get to about 70 to 80 runic power, even if it means just stopping and waiting for runes. Once there, go for that Remorseless Winter if with Gathering Storm, Empower Rune Weapon, then Pillars of Frost, and then finally the Breath. A lot of GCD, I know. Now once it's up, the goal here is just to smash that Obliterate. The Breath is gonna be granting you runes on a chance, the runic empowerment, so you can keep smashing and smashing that Obliterate. If you get Rhymes, you can use it, but only if you're high on runic power and low on runes. Remember, Breath is just eating all of that away, and Rhyme gives nothing back, and you don't want it to drop just because of that one Rhyme, so be careful. Obliterate spam is the main goal, and hoping some mechanic won't come up. Horn Horn of Winter also comes in when you're low on resources. It allows you for a bit more breath and extra obliterate for more runic power as well, so remember that. The goal here is to make the breath last for as long as possible. As long as it lasts for the duration of pillars and empower rune weapon, you're gonna be fine. If you can go for longer, great, but it's not a huge deal. Trying to combo with other things such as trinkets and whatnot is also another goal you should aim for when or if possible. Obviously, Bloodlust is another great buff to stack, so remember to wait for such. After it goes down, go back to your normal rotation. Your next Pillars of Frost you can use normally. Just remember when you're going for subsequent breaths to have one Horn of Winter, Empower Rune Weapon and Pillars ready to go. You want to stack all of that up and make sure the point you are right now in the fight allows you to channel that breath freely and is gonna hit some ad if possible or something along those lines. And yeah, on to AoE. Most of that priorities and idea will stay. Remorseless Winter is still to be used on cooldown now, even without Gathering Storm. It is your main AoE ability after all, somewhat, but the rest stays the same. That said, you now have a Frostbite to mix in, and it will basically replace an Obliterate, but on killing machines, as Frostbite, without critting, does fairly low damage, so you want that for sure chance. So when you get the proc, that will be the only change, switching Obliterate for Frostbite. That said, if there is more than 4 targets, it's worth to just spam Frostbite even without the proc. Granted, you don't have a rhyme, as it can proc it also, and you're not gonna overcap runic power. The reason for this is that the mob count will allow for a higher chance of critting on some of the mobs, doing more damage than just a regular Obliterate on just a mob. If with Glacial Advance, just use on cooldown as well, a Frostbite with Killing Machine proc, this take priority above it, and if with breath, it's the same rules as before, just keep it up as long as you possibly can, and it will just damage things all in front of you. Now, Obliteration here gets rather interesting because it gives killing machines. So yes, it's gonna feed you a lot of Frostbite. So the idea stays as before. You want to start with some runic power already, and then the rhymes, the glacial spikes, the frost strikes will give you those killing machines for the Frostbites. So you use those abilities back to back for some really juicy AoE. And yeah, that covers it. As for stats here for Frost, as with everything battle for Azeroth, item level is king, so getting more of that in turn strength will be your main goal. As for secondaries, it will highly depend on your character, so remember to sim. Generally, Mastery tends to be the best, together with Crit for more procs and just more frost damage overall, boosting most of your abilities, with Verse and Haste a bit on a weak side, but again, sim and sim. As for traits, you can see in the background which ones are the best. Yes, Tidal Surge scales with your Mastery. And yeah, that is all said and done. If you're looking for my add-ons, check down below in the description. As always, thank you for watching, remember to like and subscribe to get more videos like this, and check out my Patreon if you wish to support the channel. Have a fantastic day everyone, and I'll see you all next time. See ya!